Adobe Premiere is a software you should use to edit your videos. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully that was informative. I'll see you next time. Psych! As you can probably see, the video is in 30 seconds. But with that said, I did want to be precise and straight to the point, and now I am going to go into my reasoning. Now, with anything that has any potential to have opinion on it, this is what this video is going to be. So this is going to be my opinion, but I'm going to share why I have that opinion and why I feel so strongly about that. So the software that I use and our entire team uses to edit every video that you see on our YouTube channel within the last 4 years, it's been Adobe Premiere. Now, Adobe is a company that makes a lot of different stuff. They make Photoshop, After Effects, Lightroom, and Adobe Premiere. So they make a lot of amazing software. Originally, when I learned how to edit, I was doing it on turntables. They were tables with a monitor where you'd actually be editing your footage on like a tape cassette, very fancy kind of configuration that was kind of, I don't even know how to explain it. That's how complicated it was. But it took a very long time to edit. And then everything went from analog to digital. So it went from actual physical tapes you could see right there to numbers, ones and zeros, which is what digital is. So when that happened, that was like heaven sent, or if you don't believe in heaven, it was whatever you want to call it. It was magical. And I was super excited about this because it made it so you could start editing significantly faster. So when I first started editing, I was using software just because my cousin, their dad was kind of into the whole computer thing. They had software called Pinnacle Studio. So I started using that, and I think it actually went out of business. It's like 10 years ago. Actually, it's longer than 10 years ago. That's how old I am. So I started using that, and then I switched over to Adobe Premiere. And this is a long time ago, so this is in the early days of Premiere. So I started editing on Adobe Premiere for a couple years, and then I went to college. When I went to college, everyone was editing on 2 different softwares. They weren't using Adobe Premiere because at the time it was actually a PC-based software. It wasn't on Apple on those computers, and most people at film school, they are using Apple computers or Macs. So everything they were using then at film school, this is in 2010, they were using Avid and they were using Final Cut 7. Those were the 2 industry professional softwares out there that most people in traditional Hollywood were using, especially Avid. Now, for those that don't know anything about Avid, Avid is a super high-end editing software, but at the time, back then, you actually had to pay for actual key, and you're spending thousands, and I think it was like $10,000 plus for everything you needed to run the system as efficient as possible. So it wasn't a huge option for a lot of people, especially just starting out. So in film school, Avid and Final Cut 7 were the 2 things that they were teaching. Now, thankfully, Final Cut 7 ran super similar to Adobe Premiere. I actually think they bought some of the software to run Final Cut 7. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure on that. I was using that, and I switched over really fast from Premiere to Final Cut because it works so similar to that software, thankfully. Now, while I was at film school, I actually never took a single class on editing. Everything I learned about editing, I learned online, from reading tutorials, reading blogs, and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I got my background, but I never took a single editing class while I went to film school, but that's what they taught. That's what everyone was editing on. That's what the professionals were using as well, or at least that's what they told us. And when we did a lot of interviews with bigger name editors, that's what they were using, mostly Avid at that time. Now, while I was finishing up film school, Final Cut or Apple, they decided that they weren't going to cater anymore to the professionals because there wasn't a lot of money there. They didn't actually say that, but that's kind of the impression that a lot of people got. So they stopped focusing on their professional software for editors, Final Cut 7, and they kind of downgraded it to basically beginner editing software. It was like iMovie, but a little bit more advanced, and that was called Final Cut X. And that is what is out today for Macs that Apple makes. And that's what a lot of people use. When that switch happened though, I tried to use it for a little bit, Final Cut X, and it hurt my head because it was so simple. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I'm not a complicated editor, but I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do with Final Cut X. I had to have something that was similar to Final Cut 7. Right close to that same time, Adobe came out for Apples, for Macs. And now you could edit on Adobe Premiere on an Apple computer. So that was a huge step. And for me, that was a no-brainer. It's time to switch back to where I started, back on Adobe Premiere. And the software had gotten so good that it actually surpassed Final Cut 7. And Adobe's this massive company that their whole focus is on the creator and giving them all the tools to make the coolest things possible. So it was a super win for a filmmaker like me. At that time when I was going to film school, I think it was about $600 to buy the entire studio, which was a lot as a student, but not a lot of money for a professional. So that's what I was paying for back in the day. So I was using that, I loved it, and I just got better and better as an editor. I never got into the whole Avid world because it was kind of a different language, and I didn't want to learn a brand new language, but Adobe Premiere, it was so similar to a language that I understood. So that's what we used, Adobe Premiere, and that's what I've used ever since then, and they've definitely kicked it up. Now, one thing I love is they handle so much different footage extremely well. So I can throw in GoPro footage, Canon 5D footage, Canon 1DC footage, Red Dragon footage of different resolutions, and I can be editing that without having to compress it and convert it and this or that. I can do that right on the spot on my laptop now. Now, it's definitely taken a couple years to get to that point, but I feel now in this day, 2016, it handles so much footage, so many different codecs extremely well. That was something that even Final Cut 7 struggled with significantly. I'd spend all day shooting on my Canon 5D footage, and then I couldn't throw it in Final Cut 7 and start editing right away. I'd have to convert it into different format, Apple ProRes 422. So it was like kind of a complicated process that took a lot longer. With Adobe Premiere now, I can throw it right in there and start editing right from the start. So that is the reason why we use it now. That's not the only reason. Another big reason is everyone that I know in the professional world is using Adobe Premiere as well. So we can have a freelance editor edit something somewhere else, and they can send me the project file, and then as long as I have the footage, I can start editing it from their project file right away without any loss of time. And that's a huge deal when you're editing, is that the software works regardless where you're at, what computer you're on, as long as you have the original files. Not the original files, as long as you have the right file names and the right footage. I know there's a lot of filmmakers out there watching this video, especially beginner filmmakers. I know a lot of common ones that people use are iMovie, Vegas Studio, and I don't know the other ones, but I know those are kind of common ones that I see in the comments a lot. Adobe Premiere is what we use. We use specifically the Adobe Premiere Creative Cloud. Originally when Adobe was having their software come out, you would pay for 1.0 or 2.0. You'd pay whatever that cost, and at the time as a student it was around $600. I pay for that. Now the problem with that is it would get outdated 6 months to a year later, and then you'd have to pay another $600,000 to buy the next software 3.0 or 4.0, and if you didn't buy that, you would get left behind because you want to stay current with technology and you want the fastest and the most efficient software out there. Now Adobe, they changed their system roughly a year, maybe it was even 2 years ago, maybe it was even longer than that, but they changed it to a subscription fee. So now instead of buying it all at once, you just pay monthly a subscription fee, and then you get the newest, most updated software out there. Now you can just buy straight up the Adobe Premiere software and have the most current updates, or you can buy the entire package that they have that covers Photoshop, Lightroom, all their other coloring softwares. It's all right there that you can also pay monthly and have it as a complete package. That's what we do as a company, is we buy the software like that, and then we can use it every month. We're paying for it every month, yes, but the fee for it is significantly smaller compared to if we were just to buy a bundle right away and then have to buy the next upgrade every year. So I personally love it. Now, for you all considering what software should you use, I would give Adobe Premiere a chance. If you've never touched software at all, within the editing world, it can be a foreign language. It can be complicated. In a few weeks, we're going to be doing a lot of tutorial videos that we'll be releasing for you all that's going to go over all the basics to intermediates to advanced editing. But before we start doing that, I wanted to first talk about editing. And Adobe, they actually let you do a 1 month free trial, so you can all sign up for it and have 1 month free where you could be editing everything and have everything right there that you normally have as if you were paying, and you can experience it to see if you like it. And we'll be covering all this in another video as far as all the tips and tricks that we use while we're editing, but I wanted you to be aware of it now. So that was the long answer to my short answer at the beginning. We use Adobe Premiere. We love it. Everyone I work with uses it as well, and that's the software that I would suggest. It's awesome for beginner filmmakers, intermediate filmmakers, and advanced filmmakers. A lot of even big Hollywood movies, that's the software that they're using. Is there other options out there? Absolutely, but I feel some of them are a little bit more or significantly more complicated, Avid being one of them, but I think Adobe Premiere is kind of a universal one that probably more people out there use than any other software as far as editing goes. Once again, this is my opinion, but I do feel extremely strong about this. I love Adobe products. It is the software or the tools that we use to tell the stories we want. And we're not slowed down by the software. We're not waiting for things to take forever to render. Sometimes it does take longer if it's a super 8K, 6K, 12K file. Actually, I don't know if it can do 12K, and I've never done 12K file, just for the record. But it does handle the footage we shoot extremely well, and I love it. And I have nothing bad to say about it. So I will leave a link below to download Adobe Premiere, the free trial. You can decide where you go from here, but this is my knowledge, my experience based on editing software, and I'm going to stick to it to the end. And I'll be with Adobe Premiere as long as they continue to innovate and kill it in a good way, the editing software world. So stay tuned, we're gonna have a lot of editing tutorial videos coming out soon. But get your hands on Adobe and start kind of playing around with it and getting a good idea of where everything is. But we will cover that significantly more in a couple of weeks when we do our editing tutorial videos. Thanks so much for watching. Over and out.
Yeah, wham, bam, super tramp. And I tipping up my hat while I boost the fans. And I hover up top, can you feel the noise? All the girls scream now cause they want the boys. Yo, making all the clouds looking like a big joke. When I run so fast and I sing so low. And you never wanna mess with me, you're just dissing me. I just set me free, so just stop.